Women Voters Democracy Dialogues. We appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight or streaming on YouTube or Facebook. And thank you to Melissa Foster's Interact students for volunteering to help with tonight's program. We appreciate that. Local governance, who holds power in local decisions, will present a panel of former local elected officials to give you an understanding of the responsibilities of their offices. But first, a little bit about the League of Women Voters. I'm April Secura, president of the Northern Portage County League. We are a grassroots organization that believes the freedom to vote is a nonpartisan issue. We are political, but we do not endorse or oppose any political parties or candidates. For 105 years, our mission to empower voters and defend democracy has not changed. What has changed is the need to defend democracy. So we've continued to empower voters through voter education programs like this one, and by advocating positive change on issues that impact our lives. Let me introduce the Northern Portage County Vice President, who originated this Democracy Dialogue program. It's a series of voter education topics that every voter needs to know. Janice Simmons-Mortimer.
Thank you. So as April said, I'm Janice Simmons-Mortimer. I'm Vice President for the League in Northern Portage County. I'm co-chair of Voter Services along with Rajia Lati, and I am very excited to be a part of this panel because, as you know, the 2024 elections was a federally based program or focus where we looked at how our presidency was going to be defined and how Congress would look. Now in 2025 we turn the page and it's all about local. So just like that, the League wanted to turn the page as well, have to educate our community members about local government and the structure of it, because I think there's always a lot of misperceptions when it comes to exactly how local decisions are made and really what sort of power is held in the different roles that we have represented today. Just some words of how this will run. I will briefly introduce our three panelists, and I'll then ask them to describe a typical day in the life of their former role. I also have a set of different questions that we've created as a league over the course of planning of this event, and then we're going to open it up to our audience. So we have been giving a card and hopefully something to write with. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, we welcome that. But because we're live streaming and the way that we are small organizations, the way our microphones work, we're going to need to have the questions come to me so I can read them, so our online audience can hear it as well. So that's why we have written questions. Our Interact students will be our runners, so just lift it up high, they'll pick it up, they'll bring it up to April. April will collect them for me and then bring them up to me. So that's how we will do our questions from the audience as well. But we welcome that. I hope that this is a very participatory conversation. It's just the way that technology works for our limited needs. So first, I'm going to introduce Tony Badalamenti. He served as, well, first he is a Marine vet, so thank you for your service. Doctor of Chiropractic Medicine, and served for one term as a county commissioner here in Portage County. Next, we have Carmen Laudato. She is a former Streetsboro resident, current Ravenna resident. While in Streetsboro, she served one term on City Council. Now is Ravenna Planning Commission. Yes. And then next is Lou Bertrand. Talk about seniority. Lou served 32 years in Village Council for Hiram before 17 years as mayor of the Village of Hiram. We're going to have you just stay focused in your lane for mayor. but no, honestly, we appreciate having someone with a wide history of local government on our panel as well. So Tony, since you're immediately to my left, I'm going to hand you the microphone to talk about the day in the life of a county commissioner.
And this is okay on the desk?
Yeah, it should be.
It's, I think, one of the most confusing of the political offices that we have. The mayors have very distinct, the city council folks have it. The commissioners, we don't have much power, do we? She sat in my audience just about every day for.
Long time.
So what the county commissioner does is they are responsible for fulfilling the rules or the statutes of the state of Ohio. The state sets them, and we just make sure they carry them out. The biggest responsibility that the commissioners have is the finances for our county. Everybody, there's 8 judges. I can't even think of it. You have the auditor, you have the treasurer, and each person has a specific amount of time they have to spend in the office by statute. I think the county auditor is, 8 hours every 60 days or something like that. Ours is, as a commissioner, there is no set of rules. Commissioners are there 24/7. Everybody on our business cards have our cell phones when you're trying to call the commissioner. And everybody calls with every problem that you can think of in the county. And the only thing we can do is we can go to that person and say, hey, would you please call them back and deal with that. The budgets are set up that each person, each elected official in the county is responsible for their own budget. They then submit their budget, and then we go over, the commissioners go over it with our executive director and our finance person. And then we tell them by taxes how much money we believe we're going to have, and then the budget goes based on that. And then and typically everybody is very, very cooperative, all the other elected officials, that, hey, it looks like we're going to have this much money, but by April or May, we know we may have more, and we can change that there. But every elected official has their very own budget that's theirs. The one that I find the most interesting are judges get to sign a piece of paper that says, we order you to pay. But most of them are very, very cooperative when you say, hey, we can't do that. The commissioners have 2 meetings, 1 meeting a week, sometimes 2. They're all live streamed every day. Starts at 9, usually 11, could go to 2 or 3 sometimes. And every day, our schedules are set by our staff, but most of us are throughout the county always. That we go. Most people have. Anybody been to Randolph? Randolph. It's a tad bit away. I think it's.
You've been to the fair.
Been to the fair. I think one of the reporters called and he wanted to interview me, and he was going to Randolph and I said, "Do you know it's 43 miles away?" And he didn't, but he lived here in Aurora, so we got to meet here. So the county itself is big. It's 505 square miles. It goes from Nelson, if you go straight out 82, where it runs into 422, you're still in Portage County. Aurora, Enton, going north, it's Aurora. Going south, it's Randolph. So it's a large county, and there's always problems that are there, and issues that we're there to try to attempt to solve. That's it.
Everybody, I'm super excited to be here, by the way, especially to see young people back there. I know in just about every political meeting I go to, everybody's asking where all the young people are, so thank you for coming. So I served as a council at large in the city of Streetsboro, and it's hard to describe what a typical day would be like because they all seem so different, but there were definite concrete responsibilities. And it's the typical responsibilities that you would find on any level of legislative government, the biggest thing being the budget. And this is something that I didn't realize till I moved to a different city and see how it's run financially. Streetsboro has its own meeting once a month for finances, where that is what you talk about, everything from your bond rating to your percentage you're meeting in your tax collection from RETA. I'm sure everybody's familiar with RETA. And you make your decisions based on that. I was the finance chair. So in my legislative role, I also chaired a committee. And so I had a lot of interactions with our finance director that some of the other people on the council did not have. And I also controlled that agenda and decided what would be going on there in terms of different pieces of policy that either the mayor would bring or my peers on council. A lot of what I felt I did day to day was definitely responding to people's concerns and complaints. I always tell my students that if you're, one of my favorite quotes about leadership is that if you want to be a shepherd, you need to learn to love the smell of sheep. There's everything from can you get my neighbor's dog to stop barking, to my neighbor built a retaining wall and now my entire back and front yard is washed away along with the whole lower level of my home. And so these are things, and I feel like the commissioners did that, and probably some mayors when there was the tornadoes hitting. Whenever there's things like that, your local representatives will actually show up to those places and talk to the people that it affects personally. I was fortunate when I was on council that I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so I had time during the day where I would go to meet the people that have these concerns face to face and discuss it with them. There's a lot of flooding issues in Streetsboro. It's built on a lot of wetland. And so you have that going on there. That's always going to be the case, especially if you've ever tried to get to Hudson taking 303. You've probably noticed it. And that was a majority of the calls as well. So a lot of it was responding to concerns, my leadership role on the committee, and just a lot of other things that people don't realize that council people do, and it's a legislative task again, which is confirming mayoral appointments. It, just like it works on a federal level, and I know it gets all the noise and everything on the stations about the president's nominees for certain positions and the confirmation hearings, you do that at a local level too. The mayors just can't hire any director they want in Streetsboro. That has to be approved by council. And again, it's the power of the purse, it's the appointment powers. I'm typically, and if anybody knows me, I'm a very avid researcher. So whenever I got my council packet, which was typically a week in advance, I would look through it, and if we were going to be approving a contract, it was researching that. It was researching people that were coming up for appointments from council. And then in Streetsboro specifically, and I know it's different from Ravenna, in Streetsboro there's a lot of responsibility on the council to fill boards and commissions. In Ravenna, it's all the mayor's job. The mayor has to find every single person serving on every committee. In Streetsboro, it's different. In Streetsboro, the at-larges get to each pick one, and each ward person gets to pick one, and the mayor gets to pick some too, so there's some balance there. So a lot of it was looking for people throughout the city that wanted to serve on planning and zoning and all of the other fun things. So overall, I really enjoyed it. Social media has definitely changed the face of how local legislators interact with the constituency. There seems to be a lot more immediacy. There's no more waiting for a phone call or return email. When somebody tags you on social media, you have now a whole platform of thousands of people waiting to see what the response is. So it's kind of changed that game, but I think it makes people, it gives more transparency to government, so I think it's a double-edged sword. But that's pretty much what I have to say. I'll hand it over to Mr. Bertrand.
Thank you. I was mayor for 16, not 17 years, but it seemed like
I brought it in.
25.
You earned that extra.
You know, the mayor's job and the mayor's daily situation is really dependent on his department heads. Police, fire, EMS, roads, and the people that you appoint. And that was the key when I governed. And I saw, before I was mayor, I saw what I felt were kind of shaky, abusive type appointments. I did not appoint my best friend or someone who was supporting me politically. I appointed really good people. And that really paid off in terms of what my day was like. Because those people entered the fray and got things done and did kind of maintenance, preventive maintenance, those kind of things. Those are very, very important. And those kind of people are very difficult to find sometimes. What we did and what I did as mayor was advertise generally to find out the best people that I could find. And it made my day really go well. But what I would do on a daily basis, I'd get up in the morning, get my custodial grandkids, so I get them off to school and I go into the office and you know, meet with my people if there was a problem. Also, I had my cell phone handy, this thing, and all my department heads knew my cell phone, and so they could phone me or tell me about problems. One of the big problems that you see is because of the cities here, our old, Hiram is a very old community. We were incorporated in 1893 as a village, and we have very, very old water lines in the city, in the village. And then it has very old, so like a night like this or a day like this when it's below zero, guess what happens? Water main breaks. It happens in the city of Cleveland and everywhere because we're just old. And one of the problems that we have as municipalities is we have old and decrepit equipment because we're old. And the farther east you go, the farther the more decrepit the things get. So we did a lot of, I tried to do a lot of maintenance stuff. But the one thing that I did when I became mayor, there's a group called the AMETS, and that's where you get your infrastructure monies from the other mayors in Northeast Ohio. And I went to the meeting, and the executive director came up to me and he said, Lou, you should apply for a grant. And I said, why? He said, because Hiram has never, ever applied. And Streetsboro is another one, because when Glenn Preska got elected, I told him, Glenn, go to the AMATS meeting, because no one else has ever been there. And he is, I don't know how many millions of dollars he's got. And is real active in getting, and that's one of the things the mayor can do, is get the federal and state funds, grants, loans, whatever, and improve your infrastructure. And that's really key, and that's what you constantly think about. You know, when I first went on council, long time ago, 1973, we could buy a fire truck for $40,000. Well, now, fire trucks are well over $1 million. I know there's been inflation, but, you know, and I'm sure you know this too, that police vehicles, the danger that you have out there for your police and fire, you know, it's difficult. The other thing is, one thing that the public isn't aware of, and I think this is important, is 80% of Ohio economy is where? In municipalities. We're the engine of the state, believe me. And unfortunately, the legislature ignores us in many respects, but I won't get into that. So your everyday activities, and the mayor of Hiram is a part-time job, supposedly. Sometimes it's easy. And I also had a law practice, and being a custodial grandfather, I had that situation too with two young boys. Yes, it's routine because you've got the things that happen every day, but then there's things that are not routine, and of course, things like fires and EMS runs and just things that happen within the day, you have to be on board. So I kept this and got calls all the time. And then a lot of the folks in a small village know your number, know who you are, and they'll make a complaint to you or the council folks. And but I consider it a great honor to be in local government because that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's the most important part of government. Although, in terms of the media, they many times ignore us, and which is, I think, a mistake. But the folks in the villages and the cities, we do a lot for them. And of course, Ohio has home rule, so we have ability now in Ohio. Unlike, say, like New York State, we can set ordinances, we can tax, we can do a lot of economic things and economic improvement. We work with the state and federal government, of course, but the engine of that comes from the municipalities. And that's the one thing I wanted to tell the legal women voters, that your municipalities are important in terms of the economy of the state, very important. And I would say in terms of the United States. So that's all I have to say.
Hold on to that for right now, because I think that it's, even just this brief introduction, you three each brought up so many different topics, but you know, Lou, you just said that the role in hiring was part-time on paper, but mostly full-time. Carmen, you said that you were a stay-at-home mom, so it allowed you, at the time you were on council, to have more flexibility in terms of the hours that you put in. Tony, is commissioner role technically part-time?
No, technically full-time,
Okay.
because I had my practice for about 3/4 of that, and everybody's got your phone. We have 13 department directors that are there, and the county administrator. So your accessibility to you has to be on a daily basis. At 11 o'clock at night, when the tornado hit out the window, there, our EMA would start calling as soon as that happens. So you're there all the time. We're the only office in the county that doesn't have set hours, how many we have to be there. I think you said that at the beginning. It is, availability is always for that job.
Good. So when it comes to the departments, so I'm hearing that as mayor, you got to select folks to be your department heads. Council, you were the ones to decide whether or not those were appointed. We go back to commissioners. Commissioners, what role do you have in terms of department heads? Because some of those are elected.
We have the eight judges. There's, I think, 11 other elected officials. But we have 13 departments under the commissioners that run the county, all the maintenance there. So we're responsible for hiring all department heads. They're called directors.
And is there anyone checking you on those appointments?
We do. We have a great staff. We have a county administrator. And they will sort out qualifications. They'll put it online what the qualification is for that job. Then they sort those out who fits the qualifications. Each one of us then gets all that information. We then have a discussion about it, and then if we look at, like the resume, just like any place else, we would get involved those folks in for interviews. And we choose. And everything in the county is there not one of there's 3 county commissioners. Nobody's got power. We all have the same power, so it has to be at least two to make any decision in the county.
Gotcha. So Lou, I'm going to jump back to you, and then Carmen, I'll get back to you with how this is going. Oh, yeah. Hold on, keep that over here so I can ask my question. Yeah. So Lou, how did you find your department? Are you looking locally within your village, or are department heads like your fire chief, your police chief, your water authority, are they folks from anywhere that a mayor is looking at?
All right, in a statutory village, because in statutory cities, you run according to the Ohio Revised Code. And we're a statutory village. And certain people have said, well, you should get a charter. We could do that, but it's sometimes dangerous. But what I did, and this was my idea, I selected a committee. For instance, if we want to appoint a new fire chief, I would have one of my council people was a shift commander with Cuyahoga Falls, so absolutely he was on it. And one of our biggest industries in town is Hiram College, and I would say to the president, I want you to appoint a representative for him, and then I'd appoint somebody on the village. And then if I had the retiring fire chief, I would have him on it, and we would put the invitations out and hire the best person that we could find. And it's funny, sometimes I didn't agree with them, but I took their advice, and it was a successful way to run things. I didn't run things on who you know and all that. That's a big mistake. And I'll give you an example. In a certain village in this community, in this county, the mayor appointed a friend and in the utilities clerk. And the utilities clerk ended up stealing about $50,000 and was indicted, convicted, sent to prison. So you don't want to do that. I mean, that's just a bad move. And not that that would happen if I just appointed my buddies, but I think that if you have something like that, that kind of machinery in place, or procedure, I should say, in place, you're most likely to find the best candidate.
All right, Carmen, I'm going to have moving the mic to you. So when it comes to city council, how often were you at odds with the mayors with their appointments? Do you feel like most city councils take into account, I'm sure that Hiram's not alone in doing kind of a targeted search for these different department heads? Or do you feel like, no, there is some political patronage going on? And how much of a voice does council really have with it?
So I would say that overall, that most councils everywhere generally accept the process and confirm those appointments without question. Although I do want to point out when it comes to like promotions and certain things that have to do with safety, that there is the civil service examination, and those scores will play into some of those decisions. We did have a notable case when I was on council, and unfortunately there was like that dynamic in Streetsboro when I was on council, and there was a lot of controversial things going on at the time with the building of the new high school and things like that, that we were, we didn't always see eye to eye. There was one director that we did not reappoint. She was the economic development director, and in the time that she was there was only one new business brought in. So when it was time to reappoint her, when the mayor got a new term, the mayor then submits a thing, the council made a decision not to reappoint this director, which triggered a lawsuit, which anybody in local government, I can't speak for the county and everywhere else, but just the two cities I have experience with, lawsuits are just part of the game. When I joined council in Streetsboro, I wanted to know how many lawsuits we had, and I wasn't expecting 3 pages of Excel spreadsheets. And a lot of it's run-of-the-mill stuff, neighbors fighting about where mailboxes and things like that. You get dragged into those. Some of them are things that are personnel issues that, we don't know about it, because honestly, people who serve on, the mayor's gonna know everybody who works for the city. They're there every day. Council meets in the evening. We don't know every police officer. We don't know every firefighter. We don't know every service worker. We may know a lot of them. We don't know everybody. So when we see these lawsuits, we might not know. But some of them were already in the Ohio Supreme Court. So that was something that I didn't realize, that as a local elected official, and you get named in all of these too. If you look names up in our court dockets, we show up as defendants in all of these lawsuits. And so that's something that, even though I went to council meetings for 10 years before I ran, there was even a lot of things I didn't realize sitting out in that audience with the day-to-day stuff was that you deal with. But as far as back to your original question, so far that one case in Streetsboro is the only thing I can point to where the qualifications of appointing or reappointing, in this case, a director, was really brought into question. But I will say this, I would say judge on Streetsboro's growth, that the city made the best decision for the residents, because that city's really grown and taken off. So, and that's what's important at the end of the day. It's not friendships and making sure you don't hurt people's feelings. It's about all of you.
All right, so let's
Let
move
me
on.
make a comment about lawsuits.
You have to bring those up.
I got sued, I was there, and so anyways, went to get a credit card, and they said, no, you're getting sued for $150,000. That was in my, official capacity, so watch out for those lawsuits.
So Carmen, I'm going to start with you on this next question, because you mentioned that as Chair of Finance, that you had some say, knowledge of budget. And I guess my question is was that a gatekeeper type role, do you feel like?
It could be if you wanted it to be that way. However, you like to work collaboratively with the people you're on council with. And also, this is something very unique. I felt like I thought that all councils ran this way, but in Streetsboro, we elect each other to these roles. Is it the same on the commissioners board?
For the president?
Yes.
President, vice president, yes.
We appoint each other. And I always say that the most political election in Streetsboro is not the one that takes place in November, but the one that takes place in January, where we decide who's going to be president, vice president, and sit on these committees. But it's all about working together at the end of the day. I would say that the council I was on, we were very active, the council members themselves, in putting on their own legislation, where typically the model was the mayor created the agenda and then we just sort of ran the meeting. And so what ended up happening is that we ended up expanding that role to really fulfilling what it should be, is that if you're a legislator, don't be a lazy one. If you have ideas, think about what you ran on and what you told people you would do, because that's the whole point of getting onto these committees and doing those things, is writing the policy, writing the legislation. That's what your law director is for, which that might be the most underrated position in the city too.
I'm going to have you hold on to that, Mike, because I want to follow up with something, and then I'll go to the budget with Lou and then come back to you, Tony. How can the general public work with council? Is there a place for the public to be able to say, hey, or a group of neighbors to say, hey, this is a priority that we would like to see the budget reflect? Or no, that's where your November election, that's your influence on the budget?
I would say that the most powerful thing that you could do is show up in person to a meeting. I would say that if you are a regular, which it sounds like there's some regulars that go to public meetings, that we take what you say so heavily because we have to look you in the eye. Sending an email, I mean, that will work too, calling us on the phone. The only thing you have to be careful about is there are laws in Ohio, the sunshine laws, that when you talk about getting together with the representatives, only so many of us can meet with you. So actually, how does that work with the commissioners with 3?
No two of us can be in the same place, and we can be informed like this, but you can't make any decision at all if you're together. And it seems there's 3, it only takes 2 to make a decision. So 2 of us could be in the same place and talk about something that had made a decision.
So that's something that you have to consider, is that you can, like if you wanted to hold something at your house, discussing things that you would like to see the city spend money on, and you invite all of council, well, you could probably expect that only 3 or less are going to show up, and not because the rest of the council didn't care, but because we don't want to violate the law. And we all take that pretty seriously. And I mean, I know it's kind of funny, but it kind of exemplifies things, is that we used to always go to Applebee's in Streetsboro and, you know, have some half-price appetizers after the meeting. But when one of the people we knew in the community ran for office, we were like, what's going to happen if they get elected? Because only 3 of us can go to Applebee's. Because we knew we were going to be talking about the meeting. So I would say show up in person. I would say that most of the budget is probably things that I would consider housekeeping. But just like any budget, even with what's going on now in Washington with the federal budget, if you have ideas, we're all ears, because we can't see every single thing. Most cities, counties, municipalities, those budgets are hundreds and hundreds of line items. And there's a very good possibility that you have some type of experience in your personal or professional perspective that you can add to our decision-making process. So I know that's really scary sometimes for people to come to meetings and stand at the podium, but I promise there's usually not any more than 4 or 5 of you there. And that's kind of disappointing. We like to see full chairs and people coming up and taking part in the process. So I would say that's the single most powerful thing that you could do. I hate to say this, but tagging us on social media, because once you tag us, everybody on that forums, every one of our friends sees it, every one of your friends sees it. But that's kind of like we have to be, that's a little different. And not every legislator is on social media, and a lot of constituents are not on social media. And I would say that overall, I don't know about Hiram, but Streetsboro I know is good at this in Ravenna, and obviously the commissioners, is streaming meetings, especially since COVID. Not everybody can go to these things. I think it's amazing that you're able to get input that way. And in the commissioners meeting, I noticed that they actually stop to say, oh, so-and-so who's online has a question. Because I've never seen that before, because we don't stop our meetings in Ravenna to do that, but we acknowledge that it's there. So just come to the meetings. You have a lot of power.
One thing that I told all the new council folks, and I think I live by this, is get involved with the Ohio Municipal League. Why should you do that? Because the Ohio Municipal League is, what, 800 different municipalities of all sizes. And one of the things that they'll do on the council is say, well, Manaway's doing this and Garrettsville's doing that. Well, we're Harlem, we're different. We got a college in our town. And that's the biggest, that's the biggest taxpayer in terms of the municipal income tax. What are the other college towns doing? And we have a group, about 35 of us, that are mayors of villages and cities that have colleges. We get together and we talk. Aurora's got, I'm sure, same problems or different problems, but look at municipalities that are similar and have the similar problems, because you're going to find that somebody has a good idea. And that's what I did. I got involved with the Mayor's Association, Ohio Mayor's Association. And that's pretty much cities and villages. We kind of separate in that respect. But the most active are the smaller cities and villages in the Ohio Municipal League. And the other thing that you were talking about, the kind of pressure you get from your constituents, be careful. Be careful of your legislation. Because untried and untrue legislation is going to lead to problems. And I always call it unintended consequences of law. And I'm a lawyer, and I know I see that all the time. Unintended consequences of any ordinance or resolution, if you're a township, or a resolution if you're in a county. Network with your other groups, because first of all, they don't have an axe to grind, and second of all, they'll give you some good advice. And I always found that with the Ohio Mayor's Association. And we had a group of college mayors. We get together on Zoom, and we talk about our mutual problems. And I thought that was really important, because right now, I'll give you an example. I have a third grader. I'm 82, but I got a third grader. So, when my kids went to that same school, in the grades, in the third grade, there were 250 kids in that grade. You know how many there are now? 75. And all these schools are like that, except for Aurora. You're bigger. You're the biggest school in the county. But all the schools are reduced in size. And that's hurting colleges. So we have to be very aware of that. I have to be very aware of that, was very aware of that as mayor of college now. And we also have to be aware of that in governance, because the numbers of younger people today, like in my community, my grandkids have nobody to play with. We have to go to Garrettsville, and they have all the kids from the surrounding area. In fact, my little guy came over here for wrestling in Aurora. He had to go all the way to Aurora to get a wrestling program. So, it's not the same. And you as a official have to be aware of this changing dynamics. And of course, national level, but it's local. It's all over.
All right, Tony, I'll come back to you when it comes to budgets. How much control, and this is from the audience, how much control does the commissioner's position have over the budgets of the departments. You can say, well, this is what the tax base is, but if you have a department head who's saying they want X amount, I'm trying to be as vague as possible, but I think everybody really knows what I'm talking about. How much power does the commissioner or do the commissioners have in terms of saying, that we ran into this crisis, we need to take some money back, and claw money back, or once it's out the door, and then you look to the next year to rearrange costs.
Over the county of the 13 departments, we have total control over those. Those are completely ours. The other issues is the other 13 other elected officials. And then the judges have that little caveat that they can just order you to do that. And we have a couple judges that typically do that. But every one of those, if we said, hey, we don't know what tax dollars we're going to have in, every one of them works with us. So that the other elected officials, 90% of the time, they understand our budget right now is about 70 million there. But the department heads are, and unfortunately what's happened over the years is departments for the county are the ones that the commissioners neglected the most. And we would try to help everybody else. And one of the things that I always get is the Aurora school system, Mr. River. It's how the taxes go. And everybody looks at Aurora, and everybody looks at us anyway because we are Aurora, but for our school systems. And when I first ran for commissioner, that was the thing, oh, Aurora, you guys don't know. And I would bring up the early 1980s, the city of Aurora, if you've been here for a while. And then they brought in an incredible superintendent. There was a big change in the school board, I think mid-80s there. And I worked with Jim Costanza a lot. And Dr. Costanza brought new culture into Aurora schools. And everybody that looks at Aurora schools, we have something that a lot of people don't have. We have citizens that have put a ton of money into the taxes so we could have the best schools and we can keep bringing superintendents, as Mr. Rivero, into our school systems there. So as the county goes, the commissioners have that. Every dollar that comes into the county is accounted for, and 13 of those are directly underneath us. And one of the things you talk about social media, there's one person that's been to almost as many meetings as I've been to in the county. I don't like the social media that you can be on it, and we're on it live at 9 o'clock to however long we go, but you don't get to see anybody. The reporters don't come, they don't ask questions in person. I find that to be a little bit difficult. I'm not as old as the mayor at the other end there, but I like people to be able to see them, feel them, and all those things that, hey, this is what we have. But it opens up, I'm amazed how many people do watch the county meetings on a weekly basis there. So, but that's pretty much it for that. We're total control of the finances.
All right, I'm going to kind of dovetail a question we got from the audience that kind of fits into something that I thought, we pride ourselves in Portage and being this kind of a confluence of college towns, small cities, and beautiful rural areas, which I live out near Marilou out in beautiful Irontown. What is it like in terms of your role when it comes to having the progress like Streetsboro and building that economic engine while also not losing the community and culture that brought people into Portage County in the first place? So how does the commissioner, what role does that have in terms of balancing that? And then I'll go down the line as well.
One of our, just like every city, the economic development is huge. And we have things that are in our county. I-80 is one of them that could be an economic engine, and it's just starting to take off that way with businesses building up. There are so many. There are 18 townships. There are 6 or 7 cities.
Seven.
Seven. Yeah, my brain just shut off there. So we're a good size. We're the 18th largest of the 88 counties in the state of Ohio. Portage County is number 18. When you look at it, but there's every little township and the cities, regardless of size, they're all this individual character. We are big and we do cover a lot of land, so that uniqueness of every township and city and the couple villages we have doesn't go away. The issues go, we have the EMA, and we have this young man that's been absolutely incredible. We built a new EMA building, opened up in, I think, October. And he works, and we have this, we've told our computer folks, you do it. And they have, and I know the mayor's been on that. We have every mayor of every city and township online at the same time. And Mayor Benjamin can say, hey, we need help on Eggleston 82. And we can direct EMA right to that. So the uniqueness, even though we're getting bigger and we are growing, we have about 167,000 people in Portage County. It is, you don't lose that uniqueness. Just like Aurora's got things that just happen here. I missed the steak fries on 4th of July that we don't have anymore. But it's like that every city. And the commissioners tried to get to as many cities as you can, or townships. My favorite is making apple butter in Deerfield, which is about 35 miles away. So we don't lose that within the county, because there are so many, and we do have a lot of people, but everybody keeps their unique identity.
But do you control zoning?
We have some zoning. The cities are all responsible for their own zoning. One of my favorite ones is City of Streetsboro with Aurora East. We have our water department, we have the county engineers and elected officials, all as everybody else. And Aurora East, I always thought it was Aurora, but it's definitely not Aurora. But they built, the county, they were sued, the builders sued the county and said, don't build it, it's a bowl. And it's out in Streetsboro. Yeah. And the county lost that lawsuit. And the judge said, nope, you're going to build it. And that was built in 1951, I believe. We're still getting sued. We have active lawsuits on that because it keeps flooding. And you go there and you say, well, they told you in 1950s don't do this. But it's done. And the county we've put over $10 million into this little, I think there's 170 houses in there. And they get flooded on a regular basis. So we think we have the solution. Last year, we're working on it now. But those kind of things happen on a regular basis, and you have the responsibility because it's a township. The county had a.
All right, let's move on to Carmen with City Council. What sort of role do you have in terms of zoning, in terms of the way a community can grow or be restricted in growing? What role does council play?
I think that it's a major role to have in terms of, you mentioned zoning. So in Streetsboro, and also to Mr. Bertrand's point about being careful about who you appoint. You can't just put friends or warm bodies in these positions. They are making decisions that change the entire character of your city. I would say Streetsboro is really spread out. It's a lot larger than the city of Ravenna where I'm at now. But that's still the same impact. It is important that your city have a master plan. That is something that the mayor can ask for, but it's also something city council can ask for. Ravenna is actually almost finished with their master plan process. Why is this important? It is important to have a vision for your city of how it's going to change into the future. We don't have a crystal ball, but we can just kind of say, we need to preserve this area for outdoor recreation. There's a park that we want to keep intact, or we want to build up this residential area, or we need to have more commercial development to increase our tax base. Or maybe the schools, maybe we, in Streetsboro, we actually have an issue with increasing enrollment. That new school that was built, they're running out of space already. So you have these issues, you want to think about the future the best way you can. These master plans are important for the vision, but it's the zoning to match it. That is important. As on a planning commission, these are important rules as well. What you are allowing into your city, and a lot of it has to do with what do you want it to look like. You know, do you want to have the big industrial areas? Do you want to have a bunch of Ryan Homes developments? And some of this too, and that's why I'm glad we're having this democracy dialogue, is there are some things that counties and cities that if the zoning's there, if it's zoned residential and somebody goes and buys somebody's farm and builds a housing development, there's nothing you can do. And some cities like Streetsboro learned that the hard way when there was going to be a residential development put in off 303 and the planning commission found out about it and changed the zoning and were sued, and Streetsboro paid millions for years as a consequence of that planning commission decision. So it's always keeping focused on who you are putting on these boards and commissions, probably just as important as who the mayor wants to hire to run the different departments. There's consequences to these decisions, and what kinds of backgrounds and questions and time people can commit to these things. So if you're out there in the audience and you're like, I'm retired, or I'm a stay-at-home mom, maybe I have some free time, or I have a background in urban development or things like that, call your city. There's probably an opening on planning or zoning, and they would love to have you. I would also like to make a comment about Portage County, like maintaining this character. Because when I ran for county commissioner last year, and I visited every square inch of that 500 plus square mile area, in places I didn't even know we were. I thought I was in another county, but no, I was in Nelson Township. It was, yeah, it felt like it. It was way out. There was buggies and horses and buggies out there. I grew up in Metro Ohio, and it's very developed there. There's no rural character anywhere. It's just about, you have to go down to Geauga County for some of that. And so when I moved out to Portage County, I literally felt like I moved to the middle of nowhere. Every corner of it, they're like, you should go to Kent, that's a city. And when I drove there, I'm like, this is the sticks. This is not, where's the Great Lakes Mall? Where's, yeah, so it felt a lot different. But one thing I have to say is I've had many opportunities over the years, over the past 16 years, to move back, and I would never leave Portage County. I love this, as stated before, each one of these towns and villages has such character to it all, and I really think there's a big active role that a lot of historical foundations are playing in preserving that historical character. Actually, I sat in a 3.5-hour meeting last night at Ravenna City Council as we debated for 2 hours or more over should or shall and the design guidelines. It was a real role.
That's not encouraging someone to run.
No, I was sitting there with my council petitions. I was like, man, do I really want to do this? But it has an important consequence to it because it's about preserving that historical character and the fact that Ravenna 1799. It's been a city versus you gave the thing for the 225th anniversary. And as a history teacher, I have a special place in my heart for trying to preserve that history that we have. So I feel like a lot of cities do make a concerted effort. Streetsboro is always going to be difficult because there is no town square. There's nothing to really build it up around, but there is a very active Heritage Foundation, Historical Society that preserves those things. So again, it's just keeping in mind who's on these positions. And to me, the biggest thing that you can do in a city for economic development is preserve and support your school district. Because if the bread and butter of all communities is the family households that live there. It's the people that come and visit, that's great, you need that too, but it's the people that live there that build those $200,000, $300,000 homes. They enroll their kids, they pay taxes, they DoorDash from you, they work there. Those are the people, and guess what? If you have a family and you have a failing school district, they're going to move out of your community and you are going to lose So I really think at the end of the day, and I know that those tax assessments hurt us all over the county. It was interesting to run for commissioner as those tax assessments went up. I felt bad for Matt Kelly, he was in a booth across from me at the county fair. But it's saving those schools, and even the universities, as you mentioned, are an economic driver.
The question was about...
Just zoning, what sort of role does the mayor play in
Well,
terms of
I
the
wanted
development?
to kind of brag on that because when I became mayor, we had a school in the village. It was at Hiram's High School. And the folks before didn't want to buy the school, so they ended up auctioning it off. And some people bought it, and it went to rack and run. In fact, the basement was filled with water, and it became a hazard, so we declared it a public nuisance. So I went to the commissioners, Tony, before you were on the commissioners, and applied for CBG funds and grants. And we got them.
Can you tell, what was the acronym you just used?
CBG grants, government grants that we can get through the county.
And what it does is it helps you, it basically pays for urban renewal. We tore this building down. And Tom Chapel was the president of Hiram College, and he wanted to put a dormitory in there, so we rezoned it R4, which is intense, apartments. And but that never fell through because of the lack of students, as I alluded to. So we then made it into a park. So it's now a park, and it's got a gazebo there. It's got all kinds of interesting things, and it's 5.1 acres right in the middle of Hiram Village, and it's a beautiful asset to our community. The other thing that we did is we put a hike and bike trail through the village, wholly paid through AMATS funds, and it's going to be part, hopefully, God willing, in the future, we'll be part of that. The trails that go through Ohio, and it'll end up being part of the Headwaters Trail. And eventually, what we're trying to do, I think the mayors are, and a lot of the government people are trying to do hike and bike trails all the way to the Atlantic Ocean through Pennsylvania. We've got abandoned rail right-of-ways all over the place, and that's what we use, and we've done that. We haven't got a lot of support from the state legislature and the Congress. They've got other issues, obviously, but I think it's something for our kids and our grandkids, great-grandchildren. I think we'll be more appreciative of the nature and the nature trails that we have in the past. So that's something that all the mayors are looking to. And as far as we use, as far as planning, we've used the County Planning Commission. They've been real helpful to us. They have a fellow there that's really...
I have a lot of hike bike trails.
And he has been really very instrumental in helping all the communities. And matter of fact, what he did is he did a map for us for council land use, what's currently going on, and what your zoning is, and what the difference is. And there's quite a bit of difference. So these are the things that you do a district, county, even more statewide development, because and nationwide development, to see where we're going. Because I think that with the lack of water in the Southwest, I think it's become critical. We have the Great Lakes. We have all the water that anybody in the world would like. And they all want it, by the way.
Can't have it.
And it's going to come back here. So we're a very attractive area for the world. So we have something that really no one has.
So Lou mentioned something, and actually, I know we're running low on time, and I got three great questions in front of me, and one that I want to end with. But you talked about government funds and federal funds. There's a lot happening right now, and if I even pick up my phone, I bet there's 3 more alerts on there of new things that are happening.
Yeah.
But do you see some of the different cuts that are happening at the federal level, or the halting of the different grants funding that maybe were issued and now are somewhat frozen, or is that going to impact Portage County based on what you've seen and your experience in the roles that you've had?
I don't, from what I've seen from the federal level, I don't think it's going to affect the county.
Okay. Do you think on the small municipal levels? I think the question alludes to the Street Sparrow getting money for paving, maybe the Infrastructure Act. Do you think it's going to impact?
I would say that as far as infrastructure goes, no, but I think there is going to be an impact when it comes to the schools if there's a dismantling of the Department of Education. The fact of the matter is that although Aurora and Streetsboro are sitting in fortunate positions, considering the wealth of the community, most of the district is below median income level, and so there's a lot of kids, tens of thousands probably, that rely on free and reduced lunch programs, which are part of that, and Title I and D funding, which is going to have to do with intervention for students with disabilities. And now that there's no Happy Day program throughout the county and people servicing on that level, I would say that if that were to happen, I feel like Portage County in some areas might not notice it as much, but definitely in my community where there's so many people below poverty level that the entire district is on free and reduced lunches, those types of programs not being there are going to be devastating.
Lou, what are your thoughts? Do you think?
Well, I've got some personal experience. I have 2 special needs grandkids. I've got one boy that's autistic, and to be honest with these folks here, I've spent $25,000 on lawyer fees, and I'm a lawyer, fighting the school to get them the proper care and treatment. So I don't know what's going on at the federal level, but I do know that okay. If your child is going to move to another school system or another agency, that's $9,000 a year they get from the state, let alone what they get from the local government. If your child is a special needs child, then there's scholarships from the federal and the state government around that amount to $27,000. So if your child is not educated in the school system where you live, and it has to go to a special school, they lose that money. And I'm telling you, they fight over it. And I've had to hire lawyers to do that. And that has nothing to do with what's going on today. That has something to do with what has affected me as a parent. And then the other boy I had on an IEP, I've had to fight for him to get the proper treatment in the school. He has a reading disability, and I constantly, in fact, I just had my advocate today write in and tell the school, look, you've got to give him more treatment in terms of, but what is that? That's adding an additional teacher, an additional specialist. That's expensive, and they fight you on that. So it's a lot about money, and I've seen it, and that's something that's there. It's not something that is being created by the new election of Trump or that.
It's always
something that's going on.
It's always about the money for the kids.
Yeah, it is.
This will be a shameless plug, so later on this year, one of our democracy dialogues will be about the power of school boards. So stay tuned for Save the Date, where we'll talk a lot about funding and the role and power that school boards have in terms of, especially public schools and handling students with disabilities and the Ed Choice Voucher Program and how that's impacting budgets. All right, so this question comes from something at the very start. It is, what was the most bizarre call or question you ever had from a constituent? So Tony, I'll start.
It's amazing what people think you can do and that you can't. You get calls that, she's been calling every commissioner that I know for years, and it was just this bizarre case, and she thought the courts had dismissed it, and she wanted you to go back and get the courts to go. And that was my first week, actually. And I stayed on the phone, and took notes for about an hour, and realized that wasn't beneficial.
Carmen?
So you'll laugh at this. This has to do with me growing up in Mentor and moving out here. When I got elected to council, one of the very first calls I had was somebody upset that they were playing games with the deer list. And I said, what are you talking about? They said, you know the list of when somebody hits a deer, that they call people in the community to come pick it up, to process it. And I said, okay. And in my mind, I'm silently freaking out, like, I can't even believe this is a thing. And I said, all right. And I said, so where's the corruption on this list? And they said, well, every time, you know, they call the first few people on the deer list, and then they hit another deer, and they just keep calling the same two people. I'm like, well, I'll definitely look into it. And I actually had to call the police chief, and I said, I'd like to talk to you about the deer list. And he's like, oh, you know. And that was also really related to how many calls I got about people using other people's deer stands. So I would say that those were ones I was not prepared for, but that definitely stuck in my mind.
All right, Lou, what's
So you're talking about deer. We have a lady, she's since passed on, but she was feeding the squirrels in the community, and we got so many squirrels that we had to kind of deport them. And so we had to hire people to do this, dispose of these. They actually relocated them. And unfortunately, the one thing that you had in a rural community, you have raccoons. Now, raccoons must be destroyed. They can't be relocated because of the disease that they have. So that's a problem. We faced that too in Ireland. So maybe they haven't faced it over here before, but rural communities have different problems.
All right, so this question I'm going to read straight because I don't want to take away the audience members' words. So this is it. As a civics teacher, I have a curriculum that focuses on the national government. But I always tell my students that knowing how your local government works is perhaps more important. What would you say to young voters to convince them this is true? I'll start with you.
At a federal level, it's so difficult to get anything accomplished. Mayor Benjamin was in the House of Representatives. State level, it's really difficult because you've got a lot of people to make a change. City levels, it gets not easier, but you have more of an impact. The counties and the villages. So, and we have often high school kids will come up and spend time with the commissioner. We've had Kent State and Hiram students come and interview us. The accessibility to local government for young people at a village, a township, a city, and a county level, even though we're the 18th largest, anybody can come up, and if the young people call, I mean, I've had kids from Streetsboro, I've had them from Aurora, and I've had them from Brimfield. They can come, and if they ask you to, hey, can I have an hour of your time? 90% of the time, they're going to get an interview with the commissioner or mayor or city council people. So it is the best way to be able to get introduced and find out that people are just like your parents. They're willing to talk to you, and I haven't seen any political person at any level say, no, I'm not going to answer that question. So there's a tremendous amount of ease for accessibility for political people in counties and cities.
So as a high school government teacher, I have to say that this is something I talk to my students about frequently. So one thing that is specific, and I know I keep bringing up Streetsboro, but God, it's such a prime example. I have never lived until I moved out to Portage County in a place where every vote made a difference. I lived in a place where things passed by 10, 20,000 votes. But when I moved to Streetsboro, a guy ran for mayor and he lost the primary by 1 vote. And then down at the Board of Elections, they have recounts. There was a couple elections that went down to less than 0.5%. There's been coin tosses down at the Board of Elections. Your vote matters. And maybe in other places it's a hard sell, but in Portage County, these elections are close. If you've served on a levy committee, they're heartbreakers because the one in Ravenna only lost by 116 votes or something like that. What if every high school senior that was over the age of 18 voted for that and had a few friends that graduated the year before would have passed? I think that it's hard to build relevancy for young people, like why should I care? That's what they always come up with. And I would say this to the young people too. I would be screaming, what is there for you to do, young people? Because your local communities and counties can provide these things to do if you put the pressure on. When I was growing up, we had roller rinks and we hung out in different places, and there's just no places for you, there's no spaces. But there's also none of you speaking up and holding our feet to the fire about that problem. And the other thing is it's a financial one. Listen, when I was a young kid, when I was 18, 19, 20 and voted, I love voting my conscience on everything because it didn't cost me anything. My house payment wasn't going up. There was nothing going to be missing out of my paycheck. So I really think it's a wonderful time in your life to be a voter because you can vote with no financial repercussion to you.
I've talked to high school kids, and we have a thing on the lawyers called Law Day, and we go into the schools and talk to the kids. And I remember we were talking about, we had these situations, that were real cases, and we talked about them. I think one was someone died or something like that, an accident. This one kid's got his head down. And I said, this could be your father or your mother, you know? Oh, okay. Maybe he woke up. But yeah, you're right about the kids. But I'll tell you very honestly, I've got a daughter in the military, or she was in the military, my grandson's in the military. They're the worst at voting. They don't vote. And it's a shame. Here they are defending our country. And
I never voted when I was overseas.
I know, they don't. And they don't do a lot of things they should, but who knows? But that was one of the things that struck me, because I've been around since my daughter was in the military and was around military people for 20 years. My husband was a lifer. I saw those soldiers, and they just don't vote. It's a shame.
Different world.
Huh?
Different world.
It is. Sure is. But the kids in school, we've had a lot of the kids from Hiram College come, and they've shown a great interest because they're a little bit older, a little bit mature. And the kids in high school, some of the brighter kids, they're interested in government and that kind of stuff. But I remember when I was like 17, 18 years old, I didn't really care about that kind of
Mr. Roberto, do you guys have a registration program at the high school?
Yeah, Mrs. Durga is in charge of that, and she does a great job of making sure our 18-year-olds have an opportunity to register.
Awesome.
I will say the legal women voters for Northern Portage, we will go to Aurora, we will go to Crestwood, we will go to James A. Garfield, and the government teachers at all three districts have done a great job of getting kids registered to different school districts. So it's good to know that, at least in Northern Portage, and I'm sure throughout Portage County, that at least the kids understand and register to vote, which is great. Now, whether we can get them to the mailbox, that's something we're still working on. Yeah, stuff done. Well, I would like to say thank you. Thank you to our three panelists. Thank you to our wonderful audience here in the room and those online. As I mentioned, the school board conversation will come later this year, but on April 16th, we're going to be talking about bond issues and tax levies because we feel like with the May primary coming up, we know some issues will be on the ballot. It's always questions about how do these go on, why do they go on, what does it really mean for us? So that's going to be our next democracy dialogue on April 16th. We'll hope to see you all there. But again, thank you to our panelists.